Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a world far removed from the simple life of a medieval peasant or the brutal grind of a Roman laborer. Imagine this: you're walking through the hushed, ornate corridors of a magnificent palace in Joseon Dynasty, Korea, perhaps in the capital city of Hanyang. The air is thick with the scent of pine, polished wood, and subtle incense. Sunlight filters through intricate lattice screens, illuminating meticulously painted murals. On the surface, it's a place of breathtaking beauty, rigid etiquette, and serene Confucian order. But beneath the silken robes and the bowed heads, a chilling, invisible war is constantly being waged. A brutal, silent battle for power, influence, and often for sheer survival. You probably won't survive a day here without offending someone powerful, or unknowingly becoming a pawn in a deadly game. But we're going to dive into the disturbing court intrigue of Joseon, Korea. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling adventurous, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you guys are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in Joseon, Korea, a kingdom that spanned over 5 centuries, from the late 14th to the late 19th century. This was a highly centralized, Confucian state, theoretically governed by a powerful monarch, the king, advised by a vast bureaucracy of scholar officials. On the surface, it was a model of orderly governance, emphasizing loyalty, filial piety, and strict adherence to traditional virtues. But behind the serene facades of the royal palaces, Gyeongbokgung, Changdeokgung, Changgyeongung lay a world of intense political factionalism, ruthless power struggles, and constant plots that often ended in exile, torture, or gruesome death. Your perspective tonight is that of a keen observer, perhaps a low-ranking official, a palace servant, or even a curious visitor who quickly gets a sense of the pervasive tension. Every whispered conversation could be a secret meeting. Every seemingly polite bow could conceal a hidden agenda. The very air seems to crackle with unspoken rivalries and the silent clash of wills. The king, though theoretically absolute, was often caught in a delicate balance of power between powerful royal clans, especially those of his queen, influential scholar factions known as Sarim factions, ambitious officials, and even the formidable influence of the Queen Dowager or various royal consorts. This wasn't a simple dictatorship. It was a complex web of competing interests, constantly vying for the king's ear and, ultimately, for control of the levers of power. One mainstream historical fact that immediately defines the perilous nature of this court is that Joseon Korea's royal court was notoriously prone to intense and often bloody political factionalism, where powerful scholar-official groups constantly vied for influence, leading to frequent purges, exiles, and executions of rivals, making life at the highest echelons of power incredibly dangerous and unstable. The phrase, "palace walls have ears," was a terrifying reality, not just a proverb. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the meticulous nature of court life, even amidst deadly intrigue, is the role of royal court historians. These officials were tasked with meticulously recording every single action, word, and decision of the king, down to his most private moments, often immediately after they occurred. These historical records, known as the Joseon Wangjo Siluk Annals of the Joseon Dynasty, were kept secret from the king himself, ensuring their objectivity. Imagine knowing that every single thing you say or do, even in your private chambers, is being secretly written down by a dedicated historian, and that these records cannot even be seen by you. Historians still argue whether the presence of such rigorous and independent royal historiography, the writing of history, effectively served as a check on the king's absolute power, subtly influencing his behavior by the prospect of future judgment, or if it was primarily a tool for later factions to legitimize their own positions by selectively interpreting past events, making the objective records themselves a weapon in future intrigues. Did it temper kings, or simply arm future rebels? As you move through the palace, you observe the scholar officials, their elegant robes and solemn demeanors masking minds constantly engaged in intricate political calculations. You see the ambitious young men studying for the rigorous civil service examinations Guagio, knowing that success could propel them into the heart of this dangerous court. You hear the rustle of official documents, the hushed conversations in the royal study, and the distant rhythmic drumming that might signal a court ceremony, or perhaps a more ominous event. The court was also a place of immense social pressure. Reputation was paramount, and a single misstep, a perceived insult, or an unwise alliance could lead to your swift downfall. Favors were exchanged, debts accumulated, and secrets were hoarded, all as weapons in the ongoing struggle for power. The very air seems to hum with unspoken rivalries and the chilling knowledge that someone, somewhere, is always plotting. You feel the subtle tension, the constant awareness of watchful eyes, and the profound realization that power here is a precarious dance, beautiful on the surface, but filled with hidden pitfalls. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about grand battles. It's about the silent war waged in the palace of whispers, where every smile can be a trap, every ally a potential betrayer, and the stakes are always, always your life. You are a player in a game you barely understand, and your survival depends on deciphering its deadly, unspoken rules. Having been introduced to the hushed, yet intensely competitive atmosphere of the Joseon Palace, your understanding of its dangers will quickly sharpen as you confront the most fundamental and often deadly game played within its walls. Royal succession, deadly games. Forget orderly transfers of power based purely on primogeniture. The path to the Joseon throne was a treacherous, often blood-soaked, labyrinth of plots, betrayals, and ruthless machinations, where ambitious princes, powerful queens, and scheming factions constantly vied for the ultimate prize, turning the royal family itself into a viper's nest of deadly ambition. You quickly learn that being born into royalty here isn't a guarantee of safety. It's merely a ticket to a high-stakes game where losing means exile, torture, or often, a very public and agonizing death. It's like being a contestant on a reality show where the prize is absolute power, and the challenges involve surviving poisoning attempts and false accusations from your own siblings. You observe the young princes, sons of the king and various consorts, moving through the palace grounds. They may appear to be engaged in scholarly pursuits or martial training, embodying Confucian ideals, but beneath the surface, a silent, deadly competition constantly brews. Every achievement is scrutinized, every favor from the king is noted, and every perceived slight is remembered, because the smallest advantage could mean the difference between the throne and a forgotten grave. Their childhoods, far from carefree, are often meticulously managed campaigns for influence, guided by their mothers and powerful maternal relatives. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the image of serene, orderly succession is that Joseon Korea experienced numerous periods of intense and violent struggles for royal succession, involving princes, queens, and powerful political factions engaging in plots, assassinations, and coups to secure or influence the throne, often leading to brutal purges and the execution of rivals, including close family members. The fight for the crown was a recurrent, bloody theme throughout the dynasty's 5 centuries. Think about it, your family reunion could literally end in a massacre, all for a fancy chair. Imagine the web of alliances. A prince's mother, particularly the queen or a favored royal consort, would leverage her family's influence to promote her son. Powerful scholarly factions, seeking to align their ideological views with future power, would throw their support behind a particular candidate. Secrets would be hoarded, favors exchanged, and whispers spread, all designed to elevate one prince while subtly or not so subtly undermining the legitimacy or character of others. You might hear rumors of a prince's questionable behavior or a consort's alleged impropriety, subtly planted by rivals. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the almost desperate lengths mothers would go to secure their son's claim is the intense focus on auspicious birth dates and astrological readings. Royal mothers would often consult shamans or astrologers to determine the most favorable times for conception or birth, believing it would bolster their son's destiny for the throne, and would meticulously document these details to support their legitimacy. Imagine trying to explain to your family that your claim to the CEO position is based on the alignment of the stars when you were born. Historians still argue whether the frequency and brutality of royal succession struggles in Joseon Korea were primarily a direct consequence of the immense, centralized power of the monarchy, making the throne an irresistible prize, combined with a flexible succession system that didn't always strictly adhere to primogeniture, or if they were often exacerbated by external pressures from neighboring powers like China's Ming and later Qing dynasties, who sought to influence Korean succession for their own geopolitical gain. Was it internal ambition or external manipulation that fueled these deadly games? The stakes, of course, were unimaginably high. For the victorious prince, the prize was absolute power, divine sanction, and eternal glory. For the losing prince, the consequences were devastating. Exile was a common fate, a banishment to a remote island or a distant province, stripping them of power and influence, often under constant surveillance. But for those deemed a serious threat, particularly after a failed coup or a major purge, torture, which we'll explore later, and execution were swift and brutal realities. You might hear hushed accounts of a prince being forced to drink poison, or a rival queen being publicly disgraced and then ordered to take her own life. A gifted death that saved her family from further persecution, a grim echo of ritual suicide, which we'll also touch on. The constant pressure on the king himself, the current occupant of the throne, was immense. He had to navigate this viper's nest of ambition, constantly assessing the loyalty of his sons, balancing the power of rival factions, and making shrewd decisions about his heir, knowing that a wrong choice could lead to civil strife or even his own demise. His own life, often consumed by suspicion and political maneuvering, became a lonely existence in a gilded cage. You feel the pervasive tension in the palace, the silent struggle for power unfolding in every subtle glance, every whispered conversation. You watch the ambitious rise and the disgraced fall, realizing that the gentle grace of courtly life masks a ruthless, brutal game played for the highest possible stakes. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about hidden plots. It's about the relentless, deadly game of royal succession. Your very proximity to the throne places you in constant peril, making every familial bond a potential weakness and every ambition a potential death sentence, ensuring that the Grand Palace is a constant stage for the ultimate, most brutal power struggle in all of Joseon Korea. Beyond the immediate perils of royal succession, the Joseon court was perpetually rocked by a broader, often more devastating, form of internal conflict. Factional strife. Scholar purges. Forget polite political debates or peaceful electoral transitions. Joseon politics was dominated by fierce ideological battles between powerful scholar-official factions, groups of educated elites who clung rigidly to their interpretations of Confucian principles, and whose bitter rivalries frequently erupted into brutal, bloody purges that decimated their opponents, leading to widespread exiles, imprisonments, and executions. You quickly learn that aligning yourself with the wrong group, or even simply possessing a differing philosophical viewpoint, could cost you your career, your family, and your life, turning intellectual disagreement into a literal fight to the death. It's like being a university professor, but if your philosophical argument isn't accepted, your entire department gets wiped out by the military, and you're next. You observe the scholar officials in the royal lecture hall, or moving through the palace ministries. On the surface, they are paragons of Confucian virtue, learned, upright, dedicated to good governance. They wear their scholarly robes, engage in erudite discussions, and meticulously prepare state documents. But beneath this veneer of academic refinement, a profound, often deadly struggle for ideological dominance and political power constantly brews. These factions, sometimes called the literati factions, Sarim, held deep convictions about the correct way to govern, and any deviation from their orthodoxy was seen as a threat to the very foundation of the kingdom. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines the volatile nature of Joseon politics is that Joseon Korea experienced a series of devastating literati purges, sawa, where entrenched political factions, often driven by intense ideological differences and power struggles, brutally suppressed their rivals, leading to mass arrests, exiles, torture, and executions of thousands of scholar officials over centuries. These purges were a recurring nightmare that stained the dynasty's history with blood. Think about it, entire generations of intellectuals could be wiped out in a single, brutal wave. Imagine the escalation. It might begin with subtle criticisms in a memorial to the king, or a philosophical debate over ancient texts that slowly morphs into accusations of heterodoxy or disloyalty. The factions, typically divided into various schools, e.g., Easterners, Westerners, Southerners, Northerners, would carefully build their alliances, spread rumors, and seek to gain the king's ear. A minor policy disagreement could be amplified into a fundamental challenge to the moral fabric of the state, paving the way for a purge. A particularly quirky tidbit that highlights the meticulous, yet deadly, nature of this factional strife is the practice of memorial warfare. Scholar officials would submit lengthy, impassioned memorials petitions to the king, outlining their policy positions or criticizing their rivals. These memorials, seemingly benign, were often meticulously crafted attacks, filled with veiled insults and accusations, designed to win the king's favor and subtly condemn their opponents. Imagine a formal letter to your boss being a literal weapon, full of carefully worded legal traps designed to get your colleagues fired. Or worse. Historians still argue whether the extreme brutality and frequency of these literati purges were primarily an inherent flaw of Joseon's highly centralized Confucian bureaucracy, where ideological purity was intertwined with political power, leaving no room for legitimate opposition. or if they were also exacerbated by the personal weaknesses and indecisiveness of certain kings who allowed factional rivalries to spiral out of control, failing to act as impartial arbiters of justice. Was it a systemic flaw or a leadership failure that led to such purges? Once a faction gained the upper hand and secured the king's decisive favor, the purge would begin. Mass arrests would sweep through the palace and the ministries. Scholar officials, who just days before were esteemed members of the court, would be dragged from their homes, stripped of their rank, and imprisoned. The accusations would be severe treason, corruption, insulting the royal family, or heresy. Evidence was often manufactured, confessions extracted under torture. Remember that brutal reality from Why Justice Sucked, Section 9. And the presumption of innocence was a distant memory. The consequences were devastating. For those fortunate, exile was the fate. Banishment to a remote island or a distant province, often with their family. Stripped of all property and power, we'll dive into the cruelty of exile later. But for the key figures, the leaders of the losing faction, the fate was often execution. This could be by beheading, forced poisoning, a common and chilling method, which we'll explore in the next section, or even gifted ritual suicide, a grim honor for high-ranking officials, which we'll also touch on. Entire families and lineages associated with the disgraced faction could face collective punishment, including enslavement or social ostracism, ensuring that the legacy of a purge lingered for generations. You feel the cold dread of knowing that your intellectual opinions, your moral stances, could literally be a death sentence. You observe the sudden disappearance of respected officials, the hushed whispers about calamities that sweep through the court, and the chilling realization that power here is fleeting, and that ideological purity is bought with blood. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about hidden plots. It's about the relentless, battle nature of factional strife. Your life as a scholar official is a constant dance on a razor's edge, where a shift in the king's favor or the triumph of a rival faction could instantly transform you from a revered scholar into a condemned traitor, ensuring that even intellectual disagreements could lead to widespread, bloody purges that decimated the very elite meant to serve the kingdom. Beyond the formal battles of scholar officials and the deadly games of royal succession, another, often more personal and equally ruthless, arena of power constantly churned within the Joseon palace harem intrigue queens wars. Forget the romanticized image of docile concubines and serene royal households. The inner sanctum of the royal court, populated by the king's wives, concubines, and their powerful maternal relatives, was a volatile crucible of ambition, jealousy, and desperate maneuvering for influence, often leading to plots, accusations, and brutal purges that devastated royal families. You quickly learn that even within the supposed sanctuary of the king's personal quarters, a chilling, invisible war was always being waged, where the stakes were the crown, the lineage, and the very lives of those involved. It's like living in a very opulent, very restricted sorority house, but instead of vying for a presidency, you're vying for the right to birth the next king, and the losers often end up dead. You observe the women of the royal harem, moving through their designated quarters within the palace. There's the queen, the king's primary wife, head of the inner court. Then there are the royal consorts, ranked hierarchically, mothers to various princes and princesses, and beneath them, numerous palace ladies and servants. On the surface, they might appear to live lives of leisure and luxury, adorned in beautiful silks, attended by eunuchs and palace women. But beneath this veneer, a constant, silent competition for the king's favor, for the elevation of their sons, and for securing their own power and their clan's influence. Simmers and often boils over. One mainstream historical fact that utterly shatters the serene image of the royal harem is that the Joseon royal harem was a constant hotbed of fierce power struggles, with queens, royal consorts, and their powerful maternal clans engaging in ruthless intrigues, often involving false accusations, poison plots, and attempts to influence royal succession, leading to frequent purges, exiles, and executions within the inner court. These Queen's Wars were a recurrent and brutal feature of Joseon court politics. Think about it, your family dinner could turn into a deadly Game of Thrones, with your aunties as the main schemers. Imagine the web of rivalries. A queen, often from one of the most powerful noble clans, would naturally seek to secure her position and promote her own son as the crown prince. But a royal consort, if she bore a son who gained the king's favor, might see an opportunity to elevate her own status and challenge the queen, creating intense jealousy and profound ambition. Whispers would spread, secrets would be hoarded, and accusations, often baseless, would be subtly introduced to the king's ear. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the almost theatrical lengths of these intrigues is the use of witchcraft or black magic. Accusations within the harem. A rival might be accused of secretly burying charms, performing forbidden rituals, or cursing the king or crown prince, leading to investigations, torture, and swift punishment. Imagine being accused of trying to curse the king with a voodoo doll found under your bed, all because a jealous rival planted it there. Historians still argue whether the apparent prevalence of witchcraft accusations within the Joseon harem was primarily a genuine reflection of widespread superstitious beliefs among court women, seeking supernatural means to gain favor or harm rivals, or if these accusations were often cynical tools of political intrigue, used by factions to legally eliminate competitors when direct evidence of treason or disloyalty was lacking. Exploiting the pervasive fear of dark magic to achieve political ends. Was it genuine fear of sorcery, or calculated political weaponization? The stakes, like those for royal succession, remember. Section 2. Were life and death. For the victorious faction, the reward was ultimate power, their son on the throne, their clan dominating the court. For the losing faction, the consequences were devastating. Disgraced queens could be stripped of their titles, exiled, imprisoned, or even forced to drink poison. A gifted death, a grim echo of ritual suicide, which we'll discuss later. Their sons, the princes caught in the crossfire, could be demoted, exiled, or even executed, their claims to the throne extinguished forever. The collective punishment often extended to the maternal family clan, leading to widespread purges of their relatives in official positions, tying into factional strife scholar purges. Section 3. The king himself was often caught in the middle of these Queen's Wars, a figure of ultimate authority, yet constantly manipulated by the women closest to him and their powerful families. His favor was currency, and his indecisiveness could lead to devastating purges that weakened his own power and destabilized the court. He might banish a consort one day, only to regret it and bring her back years later, leaving a trail of ruined lives and lingering resentments. You feel the pervasive tension in the air, a silent struggle for dominance unfolding in every subtle glance, every hushed conversation, every strategic gift from a consort to the king. You observe the ambitious rise and the disgraced fall, realizing that the serene beauty of the palace masks a ruthless, brutal game played for the highest possible stakes. where familial bonds were often secondary to the cold calculus of power. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about hidden plots among scholars, it's about the relentless, deadly game of harem intrigue. Your very proximity to the king's inner sanctum places you in constant peril, making every relationship a potential weakness and every ambition a potential death sentence, ensuring that the magnificent palace is a constant stage for the ultimate, most brutal power struggle within the royal family, often with the most innocent as unwilling pawns. Beyond the open clashes of scholar officials and the subtle machinations of the harem, a far more insidious and terrifying weapon stalked the hushed corridors of the Joseon palace. Poison silent, invisible threat. Forget the dramatic clash of swords. In this world of court intrigue, the most feared method of assassination was often a meticulously administered toxin, delivered discreetly in a meal, a drink, or even through seemingly innocuous objects, leaving no visible trace and sowing widespread paranoia. You quickly learn that trust is a fatal luxury, and that your greatest enemy might be the seemingly harmless cup of tea offered by a smiling courtier, turning every bite and every sip into a chilling gamble with your life. It's like living in a perpetual game of Russian roulette, but the bullet is invisible, and it could be in anything you consume. You are at a royal banquet, perhaps celebrating a birth or a diplomatic success. The air is filled with the scent of fine food and subtle perfumes. You watch as a dish is presented to a high-ranking official, perhaps a rival of a powerful faction. The official takes a bite, smiles politely, and continues to converse. But a subtle tension lingers in the air, a whisper of unseen danger. In Joseon, Korea, where political struggles were often brutal and public executions could be messy, poison offered a clean, discreet, and often untraceable means of eliminating rivals, making it a favored tool in the darkest corners of court intrigue. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this terrifying reality is that poison was a frequently employed and deeply feared method of assassination in Joseon, Korea's court, used to eliminate political rivals, disgraced officials, or even ambitious family members, including royal consorts or princes, due to its discreet nature and the difficulty of detection in an era without modern forensic science. The fear of poison permeated the highest levels of the royal court. Imagine trying to eat dinner every night, knowing that any bite could be your last, and you'd never see it coming. Imagine the cunning employed in administering these poisons. They were often carefully chosen for their slow-acting nature, allowing the victim to succumb days or even weeks after the initial dose, making it difficult to trace the poisoning back to the perpetrator. Some might cause symptoms that mimicked natural illness, like a sudden fever, stomach ailment, or inexplicable weakness, further obscuring the true cause of death. You would learn to watch for subtle changes in a rival's complexion, a sudden loss of appetite, or a persistent cough, not as signs of illness, but as potential indicators of a silent, fatal attack already underway. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the extreme paranoia surrounding poison is the use of royal tasters. High-ranking officials, and especially the king, would have designated food tasters, often trusted eunuchs or palace women, whose job was to consume a small portion of every dish and drink before it was served to the monarch. Imagine a person whose entire existence is defined by consuming potentially fatal food, their survival being the only proof of your meal's safety. Historians still argue whether the apparent prevalence of poisonings and attempts in Joseon historical records and court narratives accurately reflects a truly widespread practice, demonstrating the extreme ruthlessness of political factions. or if accusations of poisoning were sometimes politically motivated, used as a convenient way to eliminate rivals or explain away natural deaths of inconvenient figures when other means were unavailable or too risky, making it difficult to fully verify every alleged case. Was it a common weapon or a convenient accusation that made poison so feared? Beyond food and drink, poison could be administered in other insidious ways. A carefully placed poison on a ceremonial robe, absorbed through the skin. A subtle coating on the handle of a brush or a writing instrument, even infused into incense or bath water, designed to be inhaled or absorbed slowly. The possibilities for discreet delivery were endless, limited only by the cunning of the plotter and the vigilance of the target. The constant fear of poison instilled a deep, pervasive paranoia among those in power. Trust became a fatal luxury. Every meal became a test. Every new attendant in your service, every gift from a seemingly friendly official, every shared moment with a rival, carried the chilling possibility of unseen danger. You would always be guarded, always vigilant, forever analyzing your surroundings and the intentions of those around you, knowing that a moment of carelessness could lead to your agonizing, silent demise. You feel the cold knot of suspicion in your gut, the subtle unease as a seemingly innocent dish is placed before you. You watch your servants taste your food, their faces impassive, and you try to reassure yourself that your precautions are enough. But the doubt lingers, an insidious whisper that permeates the very air you breathe. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about factional strife or succession struggles. It's about the pervasive, terrifying reality of poison. Your life is a constant, terrifying gamble against an invisible killer, transforming every daily act of sustenance into a potential death trap, ensuring that even in the grandest palace, death could come silently, subtly, and with devastating finality. A grim reminder of the price of power in Joseon, Korea. Even if you manage to escape the silent, invisible threat of poison, your political downfall in Joseon, Korea could lead to a fate almost as feared as death itself. Exile, banishment's cruelty. Forget a comfortable retirement or a quiet retreat to the countryside. For disgraced officials, ambitious princes, or outmaneuvered queens, exile was a brutal, dehumanizing punishment, stripping you of your power, your family, your dignity, and condemning you to a life of hardship and isolation in a remote, often inhospitable, corner of the kingdom. You quickly learn that being cast out from the center of power means a living death, a slow, agonizing process of erasure, far from the comforts and influence you once knew. It's like being sent to a desolate, frozen island. But the true torment is the loss of everything you ever were, and the cold knowledge that you're forgotten. You find yourself on a long, arduous journey, not to a new posting of power, but under guard, perhaps forced to walk, or riding in a simple cart, far from the familiar grandeur of Hanyang. Your destination is a distant island off the southern coast, or a remote mountainous province on the northern frontier. The landscape grows increasingly bleak, the climate harsher, the local population unfamiliar and often hostile. You are stripped of your official robes, your scholarly books might be confiscated, and your very name might be forbidden to be spoken in court. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this harsh punishment is that exile was a common and severe punishment in Joseon, Korea for disgraced officials, defeated political rivals, or royal family members who posed a threat to the throne, involving banishment to remote and often harsh regions of the kingdom like Jeju Island or northern provinces, stripping them of their titles, property, and social connections, leading to immense suffering and often premature death. It was a crucial tool for consolidating power and purging opposition without resorting to direct execution in every case. Think about it. Your punishment isn't just about moving, it's about being fundamentally erased. Imagine your new home. It's likely a small, dilapidated hut, isolated from any proper village, offering little protection from the elements. The food is coarse, meager, and monotonous. A stark contrast to the rich banquets of the palace. Remember those from our Roman parties segment, or the pharaoh's diet. You are constantly under surveillance by local officials, wary of any attempt you might make to communicate with the outside world or rebuild your influence. Your life is stripped bare of all comforts, reduced to a desperate struggle for mere subsistence. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the psychological torment of exile is the concept of a house arrest within exile, where the exiled official might be confined to a single room or compound, unable to even walk freely within their designated banishment area. This enforced immobility, combined with the isolation, was designed to break the spirit, leaving them utterly powerless. Imagine being sent to a remote island, only to be told you can't even leave your tiny hut, and every passing guard is a reminder of your utter helplessness. Historians still argue whether the practice of exile, by theoretically allowing disgraced officials to live albeit miserably, was primarily a more humane alternative to execution, reflecting Confucian ideals of preserving life, or if it was also a pragmatic political tool to remove dangerous individuals while avoiding the martyrdom that public execution might create. Keeping them alive just enough to suffer or be re-evaluated later if the political winds shifted. Was it about mercy or strategic containment? The journey itself is arduous. You, a person accustomed to a life of intellectual pursuit and administrative duties, are suddenly forced to walk or ride for days, even weeks, over rough terrain, exposed to harsh weather and the indifference of the common people you now resemble. Your body, perhaps weakened by palace indulgences or previous illness, struggles with the physical demands. Many would not survive the journey itself, succumbing to illness, exhaustion, or simply despair. The profound loneliness is crushing. You're cut off from your scholarly peers, your political allies, and your family. Letters, if permitted at all, are heavily censored and take months to arrive, offering little comfort. Your children and wife might endure their own forms of internal exile or social ostracism back in the capital, a grim echo of the executioner's family's shared shame. From that medieval segment, you might never see them again. Your connections to the world of power irrevocably severed. Your reputation, once a source of immense pride and influence, is utterly shattered. You are publicly disgraced, labeled a traitor or a corrupt official, your name tainted for generations. Even if you were innocent, the public perception of your guilt is sealed by your banishment. This loss of honor, of social standing, is often a torment far greater than the physical discomfort. You feel the biting cold of the wind, the gnawing hunger, and the profound ache of loneliness in your heart. You gaze out at the desolate landscape, a mirror of your own stripped-bare existence. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about factional strife or poison plots. It's about the relentless, soul-crushing cruelty of exile. Your banishment is a living death, a slow, agonizing process of erasure, ensuring that the heavy price of opposing the powerful, or simply being on the wrong side of a political purge, was paid not just in life, but in a prolonged, isolated, and utterly miserable existence, far from the gilded cage you once inhabited. Even if the relatively merciful fate of exile was spared to you, or if the accusations against you were too severe for mere banishment, the Joseon court had far more brutal means to extract truth, or simply confessions, torture, and interrogation. Forget polite questioning or subtle psychological pressure. In this system, the pursuit of information, or the simple assertion of authority, often involved agonizing physical torment, designed to break the body and the spirit until the desired confession was wrung out. True or not, you quickly learn that your words, your secrets, and your very will can be systematically extracted through unbearable pain, turning a legal inquiry into a horrifying spectacle of human suffering. It's like being forced into a very real, very painful game, where the goal is to make you confess, and the only way to win is to break. You find yourself in a dark, cold chamber, often a dungeon beneath a government office or a royal prison. The air is damp, heavy with the stench of fear, stale sweat, and sometimes the metallic tang of old blood. Before you, various implements of pain are laid out: wooden clubs, heavy chains, rough ropes, and perhaps more specialized devices. Your interrogators, often stern-faced officials or military officers, watch impassively, their expressions unreadable. They are not merely seeking truth, they are asserting the absolute power of the state, and your suffering is a tool in their arsenal. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with modern concepts of judicial fairness is that torture was a legally sanctioned and widely used method of interrogation in Joseon, Korea, applied to suspects particularly in serious cases like treason, rebellion, or insult to the royal family, to extract confessions or implicate accomplices, often involving brutal physical methods like severe beatings, suspension, and the crushing of limbs, with confessions obtained under duress considered valid. The goal was to secure a confession, which was often deemed necessary for conviction, even if unreliable. Imagine your innocence being proven by whether you can withstand unimaginable pain rather than by evidence. Imagine the methods. The initial interrogation might involve simple beatings with wooden rods or clubs. You would be stripped, tied, and subjected to repeated blows, aimed at your legs, buttocks, or back. The pain is searing, dulling your senses. But every new strike sharpens your awareness of the agony. You try to resist, to grit your teeth, but the relentless impact slowly turns your muscles to jelly, making your body scream in protest. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the specific forms of Joseon torture is the use of the press jury or chuibu, where sticks or ropes would be tightened around the legs or other limbs, systematically crushing the bones or muscle tissue. Imagine sticks being slowly tightened around your shins, crushing the very bones of your legs, causing excruciating pain without breaking the skin, leaving no immediate outward marks, but causing immense internal damage. Historians still argue whether the widespread reliance on torture in Joseon justice was primarily a practical tool for extracting confessions in a society lacking modern forensic techniques, believing that only intense pain could break hardened criminals, or if it was also a deeply ingrained cultural practice rooted in Confucian principles of discipline and severe punishment for moral transgressions, serving as a powerful deterrent and a demonstration of state authority over the body. Was it about efficiency or moral assertion that fueled such brutality? If beatings fail, or if the interrogators seek further information, the torture intensifies. You might be suspended by your wrists, your body hanging from the ceiling, slowly dislocating your shoulders. The agony is immense, stretching every ligament, every joint. or weights might be attached to your limbs while you're suspended, exacerbating the torment. Sleep deprivation, forced kneeling on sharp objects, or exposure to extreme temperatures could also be employed, systematically wearing down your mental and physical resistance. The goal is a confession. Any confession. Whether true or false, a confession obtained under torture was often all that was needed for conviction. You are constantly questioned, pressured to name accomplices, to admit guilt, to reveal secrets. Your mind, reeling from the pain, struggles to distinguish truth from fabrication, desperate for a reprieve. You might confess to anything, implicate anyone, just to make the agony stop. The screams of other prisoners, echoing faintly from nearby cells, become a chilling soundtrack to your own torment. You know their suffering because you are experiencing your own. The absolute power of your interrogators, their cold indifference to your pain, is terrifying. You are utterly alone. Without legal counsel, remember that from Why Justice Sucked. Section 11. Without recourse, a mere body subjected to the will of the state. You feel the searing pain, the agonizing stretch in your limbs, the overwhelming nausea, and the profound, terrifying knowledge that your own body has become an instrument of betrayal. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about factional strife or royal succession. It's about the brutal reality of torture and interrogation. Your existence is reduced to a relentless battle against agonizing pain, designed to break your will and extract your secrets, ensuring that the heavy price of opposing power, or simply being accused, was paid not just in life, but in prolonged, excruciating suffering, leaving you a broken husk, forever marked by the indelible scars of Joseon justice. Even if you managed to somehow escape the torture chamber with your secrets intact, the chilling reality of Joseon court intrigue meant you were never truly free. Instead, you lived under the omnipresent shadow of spies and informants' constant paranoia. Forget casual conversations or private moments. The palace and even the wider capital were riddled with watchful eyes and eager ears, transforming every interaction into a potential risk, and every confidant into a possible betrayer. You quickly learn that trust is a fatal luxury, and that the greatest danger might not be the obvious rival, but the seemingly loyal servant, the friendly merchant, or even a distant relative, all eager to gain favor by uncovering your secrets. It's like living in a massive, real-life surveillance state, where everyone is potentially watching you, and everyone is potentially a secret police informant. You walk through the palace corridors, your footsteps hushed on the polished wood. You observe the palace eunuchs, moving silently and efficiently, seemingly dedicated only to their duties. You see palace women attending to various tasks, their faces impassive. You greet a fellow scholar official, engaging in polite small talk. On the surface, it's a picture of Confucian harmony. But beneath it, your mind races, constantly analyzing, scrutinizing every glance, every overheard whisper, every subtle shift in demeanor. You know that someone, somewhere, is always listening, always reporting. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines this pervasive atmosphere of suspicion is that Joseon Korea's royal court and central government employed extensive networks of spies and informants, including palace eunuchs, guards, and lower-ranking officials, to monitor political factions, gather intelligence on potential dissidents, and uncover plots, creating a pervasive culture of paranoia and distrust among courtiers and high-ranking officials. Loyalty was constantly tested, and disloyalty was severely punished. Think about it. Your own shadow might be reporting on you. Imagine the subtle methods of surveillance. A palace eunuch, seemingly harmless, might be tasked with reporting on the comings and goings in the queen's quarters, or the secret meetings of a particular faction. A trusted palace woman might be listening intently to the conversations in a consort's private chambers. Relaying juicy tidbits or incriminating remarks to her ambitious mistress, remember that intense harem intrigue from Section 4. These informants were everywhere, often motivated by personal ambition, financial reward, or simply fear for their own lives if they failed to deliver. A particularly quirky tidbit that highlights the meticulous nature of this surveillance and the lengths some went to avoid it is the alleged use of secret passages or concealed listening posts within palace architecture. While many of these are likely exaggerated in popular legend, the very belief in their existence fostered an environment where powerful figures felt the need to communicate in coded language or in seemingly impossible-to-monitor locations. Imagine having to check behind every tapestry or under every floorboard before having a private conversation, just in case there's a hidden ear. Historians still argue whether the extensive use of spies and informants in Joseon court intrigue was primarily a necessary tool for maintaining a highly centralized autocratic state and suppressing inevitable factionalism, reflecting a pragmatic approach to power, or if it inadvertently led to heightened instability and political purges, as fabricated or exaggerated intelligence often resulted in the unjust persecution of innocent individuals, fueling cycles of distrust and revenge. Did it create security, or just chaos? The threat of internal betrayal is particularly chilling. The colleague you share a meal with, the junior official you mentor, the distant relative who seeks your patronage, any of them could be an informant, carefully collecting incriminating evidence against you. A carelessly voiced opinion, a slight criticism of the king's policy, or an unwitting association with a disgraced faction. Remember, those scholar purges from Section 3 could be meticulously recorded and presented to your rivals, sealing your downfall. You develop a profound distrust of everyone. Every seemingly friendly gesture is scrutinized for ulterior motives. Every piece of information shared is weighed for its potential to be used against you. You become adept at speaking in veiled terms, using euphemisms, and avoiding direct answers, even in seemingly benign conversations. Your true thoughts, your genuine feelings, are buried deep within, a fortress of secrets designed to protect yourself from unseen enemies. The psychological toll is immense. You live in a constant state of low-level anxiety, your nerves perpetually frayed. Sleep offers little respite as your mind continues to replay conversations, analyze glances, and search for unseen threats. The inability to truly relax, to truly trust anyone, transforms your opulent surroundings into a gilded prison of paranoia. The most luxurious silks, the most exquisite food, the most brilliant intellectual discussions, all are tainted by the omnipresent fear that someone, somewhere, is listening, waiting, plotting. You feel the cold weight of your own secrets, the perpetual tension in your shoulders, and the profound, aching loneliness that comes from being constantly guarded. You smile politely at a passing official, your eyes betraying nothing, and then quickly assess his gait, his expression, wondering what he knows or what he is planning. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about the grand battles for power. It's about the pervasive, soul-crushing reality of spies and informants. Your life is a constant, terrifying dance with paranoia, where trust is a fatal weakness, and every whispered word or hidden gesture could be the key to your swift and brutal downfall. ensuring your very existence is a living testament to the chilling price of ambition in a palace built on secrets. Even if your carefully constructed life of secrecy and vigilance managed to evade the ubiquitous spies and informants, a final chilling fate often awaited disgraced high-ranking officials in Joseon, Korea. Ritual suicide, gifted death. Forget a simple prison sentence or a quiet banishment for those who fell out of favor, committed grave offenses, or whose political faction was purged. The king might offer a gift of poison, a culturally sanctioned, yet utterly forced, means to end one's life, preserving a veneer of honor while ensuring swift and silent elimination. You quickly learn that dying by your own hand could be a mark of perverse respect, and that the ultimate act of defiance might be simply accepting your predetermined end. It's like receiving a polite invitation to your own funeral, but refusing to attend means a far more public and humiliating demise. So you just smile and drink the poison. You hear the dreaded news the king has sent a royal envoy to your home. Your political faction has fallen from grace. Remember those brutal scholar purges from Section 3, or you have been accused of a grave transgression against the throne. You are ordered to commit suicide. This isn't a suggestion, it's a command, delivered with solemn formality, and refusal means a public execution, often involving torture. Remember that grim reality from Section 7. The shame of public execution, of having your body disgraced, would extend to your entire family, stripping them of their social standing and potentially condemning them to exile or worse. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with modern notions of self-determination is that ritual suicide, particularly by poison, was a formally recognized and frequently used method for high-ranking disgraced officials or royal family members in Joseon, Korea to end their lives by royal decree, allowing them to avoid public execution and preserve a semblance of family honor. But it was ultimately a forced act of compliance with the monarch's will. It was seen as a way to cleanse a grave transgression and protect one's lineage from further disgrace. Think about it. The ultimate punishment is disguised as a final act of personal honor. Imagine the scene. The royal envoy presents you with a small, exquisite bowl containing a potent, fast-acting poison. The room is solemn, hushed. You might be given a moment to compose a final poem, to write a last letter to your family, or to offer a final bow to your ancestors. This isn't an act of remorse, it's a carefully orchestrated ritual, preserving the outward appearance of dignity even in the face of utter defeat. A particularly quirky tidbit that highlights the psychological pressure of this gift is that sometimes, particularly for those deeply ingrained in Confucian ideals, the individual would meticulously follow the ritual, believing that by accepting this honorable death, they were performing a final act of loyalty to the king and the state, despite the injustice or political machinations that led to their downfall. Imagine ending your life out of a sense of duty, even when you know you're innocent, simply because it's the honorable way to go. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of ritual suicide among disgraced Joseon officials primarily served as a genuine mechanism for preserving family honor and mitigating collective punishment, providing a culturally acceptable form of capital punishment, or if it was more fundamentally a cynical tool of political control. Allowing the king and his factions to eliminate powerful rivals discreetly while maintaining an illusion of magnanimity and preventing the martyrdom that public execution might create. Was it about honor or control that made gifted death so common? The poison, once consumed, would act swiftly. You would feel a sudden burning, a rapid weakening, and then, mercifully, a loss of consciousness as your life ebbs away. The body, once vital and learned, quickly becomes inert, ready for a private, dignified burial, a stark contrast to the public display of an executioner's corpse. Remember that from the miserable life of a medieval executioner. Section 10. Your family would receive your body, allowed to grieve privately, their honor preserved, however tenuously, by your final act of compliance. The psychological burden on those who received this gift must have been immense. To know that your life is forfeit, that your career is over, and that your family's fate rests on your willingness to end yourself is a crushing weight. The internal struggle between self-preservation and the profound pressure of societal norms and royal command would be terrifying. Many would simply accept it, having exhausted all other avenues of protest or escape. This practice underscores the absolute power of the Joseon monarchy and the pervasive influence of Confucian ideals of loyalty and honor, even when perverted by political intrigue. Death, even by one's own hand, could be a final act of submission to the state, a chilling testament to the lengths to which power would go to maintain its grip. You feel the cold dread settle in your stomach, the terrible clarity of the choice presented before you. You gaze at the bowl of poison, knowing that your life, your legacy, and the fate of your family hinge on this single, final act. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about torture or betrayal. It's about the grim reality of ritual suicide. Your life could be extinguished by a gifted death, a forced end designed to preserve a veneer of honor while serving the ruthless aims of power, ensuring that for many, the final act of their miserable life was a deliberate, agonizing compliance with the king's brutal will, sealing your fate with your own hands. Even as you, a disgraced official, contemplate the grim gift of ritual suicide, your mind might turn to the man who issued the decree, the absolute monarch of Joseon Korea. From the outside, he appears to wield limitless power, but a closer look reveals the profound, often crushing burden of royal authority king's dilemma. Forget the image of an unchallenged autocrat. The Joseon king, despite his divine mandate, was often a prisoner in his own palace, constantly navigating a treacherous landscape of powerful factions, scheming relatives, and rigid Confucian principles that subtly, yet relentlessly, constrained his true power. You quickly learn that even atop the throne, absolute power often came with immense pressure, profound loneliness, and a chilling lack of genuine autonomy, turning kingship into a gilded cage. It's like being the conductor of a massive orchestra, but every musician has their own ideas, and if you hit the wrong note, the entire ensemble might just decide to play a different song. Or worse, pack up and leave. You observe the king in his audience chamber, surrounded by ministers, courtiers, and eunuchs. He is the Son of Heaven, the supreme ruler, but his every word is scrutinized, his every action weighed. He must maintain Mayat cosmic order. Remember that from the pharaoh's terrible job. Ensure the prosperity of the kingdom, and uphold Confucian virtues. This is not a job for the faint of heart, or the easily swayed. His decisions carry immense weight, affecting millions of lives. Yet his ability to act truly independently is often severely limited. One mainstream historical fact that utterly redefines the concept of absolute monarchy in Joseon Korea is that despite the king's theoretical absolute authority as Son of Heaven, his power was often significantly constrained by powerful scholar-official factions, the influence of royal in-laws, Confucian ideological principles, and the ever-present threat of internal plots or scholar purges. forcing him to constantly balance competing interests and often leaving him isolated amidst court intrigue. The king was frequently a strategic balancer of power rather than an unchecked despot. Think about it, you might be the king, but you still have to worry about your ministers forming a secret club to undermine you. Imagine the constant pressure. The scholar official factions remember those scholar purges from Section 3 constantly vied for his ear, each pushing their own interpretation of Confucian orthodoxy, each eager to see their rivals disgraced. A wrong decision by the king could lead to one faction gaining too much power, triggering a bloody purge, or causing deep resentment among the losing side. He had to be a master politician, constantly playing factions against each other, or attempting to rise above them, a perilous balancing act. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the subtle constraints on the king's power is the institution of the royal lecturers Kyongyeon. These were scholar officials whose duty was to engage the king in daily discussions of Confucian classics and statecraft, effectively tutoring and morally advising him. While seemingly benign, these lectures also served as a forum for subtle criticism of the king's policies or behavior, reminding him of his Confucian duties and the moral expectations of his role. Imagine having a daily tutoring session with your advisors where they subtly tell you you're doing a terrible job by quoting ancient philosophers. Historians still argue whether the Kyongyeon system primarily functioned as a genuine educational tool for the king, ensuring his intellectual and moral development in line with Confucian ideals, or if it was also a clever mechanism employed by the scholar officials to subtly control and legitimize the monarch, ensuring he remained within their ideological framework and limiting his capacity for independent action. Was it about education or control that made lectures so influential? The influence of his royal family, particularly the Queen and Queen Dowager, and their powerful maternal clans, was another constant constraint. Harem intrigue. Remember Section 4's Queen's Wars constantly threatened to draw him into devastating family conflicts, forcing him to choose between rival wives or ambitious sons. Recall royal succession from Section 2. Decisions that could have catastrophic consequences for his reign and the stability of the court. He might wish for a simple family, but his family was a political battleground. His personal life was not his own. Every action, every word, was meticulously recorded by royal court historians. Remember them from the intro. He was under constant surveillance, tying into spies and informants. Section 8. Wary of plots from within and without assassination. Section 5. Even the gift of ritual suicide for disgraced officials from Section 9 was a tool he wielded, but it also reflected the severe consequences for his own failures or misjudgments. The king often faced the dilemma of conflicting loyalties and advice. Should he prioritize his duty to the state, or his filial piety to his mother or family? Should he side with one faction for ideological purity, or attempt to balance them for pragmatic stability? These choices were agonizing, their outcomes often unpredictable, leading to periods of profound isolation for the monarch. He might be the most powerful man in the kingdom, but he was also the loneliest, constantly suspicious of those around him. You feel the immense pressure, the subtle constraints, and the chilling realization that even the king, seemingly untouchable, is a prisoner of his own throne. You watch him, his face often etched with weariness or a careful impassivity, making decisions that carry the weight of an entire nation. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about the suffering of those below. It's about the profound burden of royal authority. Your life as king is a constant, agonizing tightrope walk, perpetually balancing powerful factions, ambitious family members, and rigid ideological demands, ensuring that even atop the most magnificent throne, absolute power was often a heavy, isolating, and ultimately terrifying burden, a gilded cage from which true freedom was an impossible dream. Even if the king managed to perfectly balance his powerful internal factions and assert his royal authority, his reign was constantly shadowed by another relentless source of pressure: foreign influence, external pressures. Forget isolated kingdoms. Joseon Korea, strategically located between the colossal Chinese Empire Ming and later Qing and an ambitious Japan, was perpetually caught in a perilous diplomatic tightrope walk, requiring ceaseless vigilance, intricate appeasement, and often humiliating concessions to avoid catastrophic invasion. You quickly learn that your fate, and the fate of your kingdom, is not entirely your own, but a fragile dance dictated by the whims of far more powerful neighbors, turning every border skirmish or diplomatic demand into an existential threat. It's like living in a small house nestled precariously between two enormous, perpetually squabbling giants, and every time they sneeze, your house shakes. You observe the king in his audience chamber, receiving envoys not just from within Joseon, but from the powerful Ming or Qing dynasties of China, or from the aggressive Japanese shogunate. The atmosphere is tense, formal, and filled with a profound sense of submission. Gifts are exchanged, often lavish ones from Joseon, symbolizing tribute and loyalty. The language used is meticulous, crafted to convey deference and respect, even when delivering difficult news or making subtle requests. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines Joseon Korea's perilous geopolitical situation is that Joseon Korea existed as a tributary state to the dominant Chinese Empire, first Ming, then Qing, necessitating constant diplomatic deference, regular tribute missions, and careful adherence to Chinese customs, while simultaneously navigating the aggressive expansionist policies of Japan, which frequently led to invasions and profound existential threats. This made Joseon's foreign policy a constant high-stakes balancing act. Think about it. Your primary foreign policy involves trying to keep two superpowers from either demanding too much or trying to conquer you. Imagine the demands. The Chinese emperor might demand regular tribute missions, requiring Joseon to send lavish gifts of gold, silver, ginseng, and skilled craftsmen, often at great cost to the kingdom's treasury. Remember how difficult it was for the pharaoh to manage bureaucracy and taxes. Section 3. These missions were not just economic burdens, they were symbols of Joseon's subordinate status, a constant reminder of Chinese suzerainty. The Chinese might also interfere in Joseon's internal politics, demanding the removal of certain officials or influencing royal succession. Remember those deadly games. Section 2. Subtly or overtly asserting their moral authority over their little brother kingdom. A particularly quirky tidbit that highlights Joseon's meticulous attempts to appease China is their adoption of Chinese calendar systems, ritual protocols, and even some architectural styles in the palace, all to signal their loyalty and cultural alignment with the dominant power. Imagine changing your national holiday schedule and the design of your government buildings, just to keep a powerful neighbor happy and avoid war. Historians still argue whether Joseon's policy of profound deference to China Sadai, or serving the great, was primarily a pragmatic and successful diplomatic strategy that ensured long periods of peace and cultural exchange, allowing Joseon to thrive under Chinese protection, or if it also stifled genuine independent development and occasionally led to humiliating concessions that undermined national sovereignty, perpetuating a subservient relationship for centuries. Was it pragmatic survival or national humiliation that guided their foreign policy? Then there was Japan. Joseon's relationship with Japan was far more volatile. While periods of peaceful trade existed, Japan's expansionist ambitions often led to brutal invasions like the Imjin War in the late 16th century, devastating the Korean peninsula, slaughtering its people, and destroying its cultural heritage. The threat of Japanese pirates' Waco along the coast was also constant, requiring significant military resources to suppress. You, as king, are constantly balancing the demands of the powerful Chinese overlord with the aggressive incursions of your eastern neighbor, a perilous tightrope walk that could erupt into catastrophe at any moment. Your royal decisions, particularly regarding military spending, remember those unforgiving battles from Section 6, resource allocation, and even internal political appointments are constantly influenced by these external pressures. A strong China might provide a shield against Japan, but might also demand more tribute. A weakened Japan might offer a chance for asserting independence, but could also invite a more direct Chinese intervention if perceived as an act of disloyalty. The sheer mental strain of this constant balancing act is immense. You are perpetually weighing veiled threats against diplomatic niceties, trying to predict the intentions of foreign rulers, and calculating the risk of every diplomatic exchange. The intelligence gathered by your spies, remember them. Section 8 on foreign powers is vital, yet often unreliable, adding to the inherent uncertainty. You feel the weight of countless generations of tributary obligations, the subtle condescension from Chinese envoys, and the constant chilling fear of a Japanese fleet appearing on your horizon. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about internal power struggles. It's about the pervasive, terrifying reality of foreign influence. Your life as king is a continuous, high-stakes diplomatic game, perpetually balancing the demands of powerful neighbors, making agonizing concessions, and living under the constant threat of invasion, ensuring that the heavy price of being a kingdom caught between giants was paid not just in tribute and humiliation, but in the relentless, exhausting burden of maintaining a precarious peace for your entire nation. Even amidst the immense external pressures of foreign relations, your daily life as king, and the delicate balance of your court were constantly influenced by a unique and often ambiguous class of palace inhabitants. Eunuchs trusted, feared. Forget simple palace servants. Joseon eunuchs held positions of immense power, acting as the king's closest personal attendants, confidants, and administrators of the inner court. Yet their very existence as castrated men placed them outside conventional social norms, making them figures of both indispensable loyalty and profound suspicion. You quickly learn that your most trusted ears might belong to someone who is feared by the outside world, turning your inner circle into a complex web of dependence and unspoken tension. It's like having a team of highly dedicated, utterly loyal personal assistants who are simultaneously resented by everyone else in the company, and whose personal ambitions are shrouded in mystery. You observe the eunuchs moving through the palace corridors, their distinct, often high-pitched voices echoing softly. They are ubiquitous, present in every aspect of royal life. From the king's personal chambers to the queen's quarters, remember those Queen's Wars in Section 4, to the administrative offices. They serve as guardians of the inner palace, overseers of palace women, messengers, and sometimes even as intelligence gatherers and confidants to the king. Their close proximity to the monarch and the royal family, and their perceived lack of conventional ambition, since they could not father children or establish their own lineage in the traditional sense, theoretically made them exceptionally loyal and trustworthy. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines their unique role is that Joseon Palace eunuchs Naija held significant and often powerful positions within the royal court, serving as personal attendants, inner palace administrators, and trusted confidants to the king and queen, wielding influence disproportionate to their social standing due to their intimate access to the monarch and their theoretical lack of dynastic ambition. Their unique status, both privileged and marginalized, made them an ambiguous force in court politics. Think about it. Your closest advisors are men who literally gave up their manhood to serve you. Imagine the absolute trust placed in them. They are privy to the king's most private moments, his deepest thoughts, his most secret plans. They attend to his every personal need, from dressing and bathing to serving his meals, making them potential conduits for poison. Remember that terrifying threat from Section 5. This intimate access gives them unparalleled opportunities for influence, subtly whispering advice into the king's ear, or relaying crucial information or misinformation from one faction to another. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects their ambiguous social position is that while they were indispensable within the palace, holding significant administrative power, they were also often treated as social outcasts by the broader Confucian society. They couldn't pass the civil service exams, and their families often faced social stigma. Yet, paradoxically, some eunuchs managed to accumulate immense wealth and establish powerful networks of patronage outside the palace, often through illicit means. Imagine being a powerful palace official, managing the king's household. But on the outside, you're often mocked and shunned, forced to live in a weird social limbo. Historians still argue whether the influential role of eunuchs in Joseon court intrigue primarily acted as a stabilizing force, providing a loyal, non-dynastic bureaucracy directly serving the king, or if their accumulation of power and wealth, often through illicit means, inadvertently became a source of corruption and factionalism, creating a shadow government that undermined the king's authority. Did they stabilize or corrupt the court? The dual nature of their existence, as both trusted intimates and social outcasts, bred a unique psychology. They could be fiercely loyal to the king, as their entire existence depended on his favor. But they could also harbor immense personal ambition, seeking power and wealth through their unique access, becoming key players in the court's constant intrigues. They often formed their own factions, aligning with powerful queens or scholar groups, subtly manipulating events from behind the scenes. You might witness a eunuch discreetly exchanging a whispered word with a queen dowager. Remember those powerful maternal relatives from Section 4's Queen's Wars? Or delivering a coded message from a foreign envoy, tying into foreign influence. Section 11, to the king's private chambers. Their influence was rarely overt, but it was profoundly felt, a silent undercurrent shaping the flow of power. Their personal survival often depended on their ability to navigate these treacherous political waters, to pick the winning side, or to remain indispensable to the monarch. The king himself, while relying heavily on his eunuchs for day-to-day management and personal service, also had to be wary of their potential for manipulation or corruption. Their intimate knowledge of palace secrets, their access to the royal family, and their ability to control information flows made them incredibly powerful, but also dangerous if their loyalty wavered. He might trust them with his life, but he still had to monitor their actions, a subtle tension in even his closest relationships. You feel the pervasive silence of their movements, the piercing gaze of their watchful eyes, and the profound ambiguity of their loyalty. You realize that even in the most intimate corners of the palace, power is never truly singular. and hidden hands constantly pull the strings. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about the grand battles for power, it's about the subtle, pervasive influence of eunuchs. Your reliance on these trusted, yet feared, figures creates a complex web of dependence and suspicion, ensuring that the king's own inner circle was a constant source of both comfort and potential peril, a unique and unsettling aspect of your terrible job at the heart of Joseon power. Beyond the political maneuverings of factions and the subtle influence of eunuchs, your life as king, and indeed the entire Joseon court, was constantly shadowed by another, more ancient and deeply unsettling force: shamans and sorcery hidden fears. Forget purely rational governance. Despite the dominant Confucian philosophy, a pervasive belief in magic, spirits, and the power of shamans deeply permeated all levels of society, including the palace, leading to secret rites, accusations of dark sorcery, and profound anxieties about unseen malevolent forces. You quickly learn that even the most powerful monarch could be gripped by irrational terror, and that a seemingly harmless ritual could be twisted into a deadly weapon of court intrigue. It's like being the head of a highly logical, rational government, but secretly, everyone is terrified of ghosts, and some people are trying to use those ghosts to kill you. You observe the discreet arrival of a shaman, or mudang, at the palace gates. They might be summoned by a worried queen. Remember those harem intrigues. Section 4. An anxious royal consort, or even, privately, by the king himself. Their presence contrasts sharply with the austere Confucian scholars. They wear colorful robes, carry ritualistic instruments, and often possess an air of otherworldly knowledge. The palace, usually a bastion of order and reason, suddenly hums with a different kind of energy, one rooted in ancient superstitions and primal fears. One mainstream historical fact that utterly contrasts with the image of a purely Confucian state is that despite Joseon Korea's official embrace of Confucianism, traditional shamanistic beliefs and practices remained deeply ingrained in all levels of society, including the royal court, leading to the frequent consultation of shamans for rituals of healing, divination, warding off evil, and a pervasive fear of sorcery, which often became a weapon in court intrigues and power struggles. The rational and the mystical coexisted, often uneasily. Imagine your country's official philosophy being all about reason, but secretly, everyone's terrified of curses. Imagine the secret rituals performed within the palace walls. A shaman might be summoned to diagnose a mysterious illness afflicting a royal family member, perhaps one of those royal ailments from the pharaoh's terrible job. Section 14, where inbreeding caused health issues. Instead of just relying on court physicians, desperate royals would turn to a shaman who might perform elaborate exorcisms, chanted incantations, or intricate divination rites, seeking to identify the malevolent spirit or curse causing the affliction. You might hear the rhythmic drumming, the chanting, and the strange, eerie wails coming from a secluded part of the palace during these nocturnal ceremonies. A particularly quirky tidbit that demonstrates the weaponization of these hidden fears is the frequent accusation of sorcery gosa, or evil magic, leveled against rivals in court intrigues, particularly during the bloody factional purges. Remember Section 3, Scholar Purges, and Section 4, Harem Intrigue, or Royal Succession Disputes, Section 2. This often involved planting incriminating evidence, such as effigies, charms, or cursed objects, in a rival's quarters, then discovering them to prove a conspiracy against the royal family or the state. Imagine a political opponent framing you by planting a voodoo doll under your bed. and that's enough to get you exiled or executed. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of sorcery accusations in Joseon court intrigue was primarily a genuine reflection of pervasive superstitious beliefs among the elite, who truly feared dark magic as a tool of assassination or influence, or if these accusations were primarily cynical political ploys, exploiting popular fears and Confucian moral anxieties to legally eliminate rivals when direct evidence of treason was lacking, providing a convenient and emotionally charged pretext for purges. Was it true fear or clever manipulation that drove such accusations? The accusations could lead to brutal interrogations and torture. Remember Section 7, as officials sought to uncover the truth of the sorcery plot. Confessions, however coerced, would be extracted, and the accused, often innocent, would face severe punishments, including execution, to purge the perceived evil from the palace and the kingdom. The fear of dark magic was so strong that it could override rational judgment and due process, leading to tragic outcomes. The king himself, despite his Confucian education, might not be immune to these hidden fears. He might secretly consult shamans for his own ailments, for guidance on state affairs, or to ensure the prosperity of his reign, tying into divine punishment for famine. Section 7 and the King's Burden of Ma'at from Section 12 of Pharaoh's Terrible Job. This personal engagement with shamanism, even if discreet, underscores the deep tension between the official state philosophy and the pervasive folk beliefs. The influence of powerful palace women, particularly queens and royal consorts, often played a significant role in bringing shamans into the court or in initiating sorcery accusations. As they navigated the treacherous landscape of harem intrigue, their desperate ambition, combined with genuine superstition, could unleash terrifying forces within the palace. You feel the subtle chill in the palace air, not from temperature, but from the pervasive, unspoken fear of the unseen. You hear the hushed whispers about strange illnesses, about curses, about the dark rituals performed in secret. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about political power. It's about the profound, unsettling reality of shamans and sorcery. Your life in the palace is a constant dance with hidden fears, where ancient superstitions could be weaponized against you, transforming spiritual beliefs into tools of political destruction and leaving you vulnerable to accusations that defied logic, ensuring that even in the most refined court, the shadows of ancient magic loomed large, a terrifying testament to the power of human fear and belief. Even if you manage to avoid the tangible horrors of torture and the existential dread of sorcery accusations, your standing in the Joseon court was constantly vulnerable to another, more insidious weapon: propaganda reputation's ruin. Forget objective truth or a fair hearing. In this world of relentless intrigue, your good name, your family's honor, and your very legitimacy could be systematically dismantled through carefully crafted rumors, subtle smears, and outright false accusations, spread by your rivals to undermine your influence and pave the way for your downfall. You quickly learn that your greatest asset isn't your loyalty or your skill, but your untarnished reputation, and that a whisper, once started, could spread like wildfire, consuming everything you've built. It's like living in a perpetual social media war. But instead of losing followers, you lose your job, your freedom, and your life, all based on a lie. You move through the palace, acutely aware of the whispers that seem to follow certain individuals. Perhaps a powerful minister has suddenly fallen ill, or a royal consort has lost the king's favor. Soon, rumors begin to circulate a secret meeting with a rival faction, a questionable financial dealing, or a perceived insult to a powerful relative. These aren't innocent gossip. They are carefully planted seeds, designed to poison a reputation and prepare the ground for a devastating political attack. The air is thick with unspoken accusations and the chilling knowledge that tomorrow, the target of these whispers could be you. One mainstream historical fact that utterly defines the insidious nature of Joseon court intrigue is that political factions in Joseon Korea routinely employed sophisticated methods of propaganda, including spreading rumors, fabricating accusations, and discrediting rivals' characters through public memorials and subtle whispers to erode their reputation and political influence, often paving the way for purges, exile, or execution, regardless of actual guilt. The battle for public perception, particularly the king's perception, was a vital and brutal aspect of power struggles. Imagine your career ending because someone convinced the king you secretly love cats more than Confucianism. Imagine the cunning of your rivals. They might subtly plant a story about your alleged corruption, perhaps exaggerating a minor financial oversight into a grand embezzlement scheme. Remember those terrible jobs in ancient Rome, where some officials were corrupt Section 11 of awful jobs. Or they could subtly suggest that your loyalty to the king is wavering. Twisting an innocent conversation with a foreign envoy, remember those tricky diplomacy talks from Section 11 into proof of treason. These accusations are rarely direct initially. They are subtle insinuations, repeated just enough to sow seeds of doubt in the king's mind and among your potential allies. A particularly quirky tidbit that highlights the importance of reputation and its destruction is the frequent use of slander or calumny. Accusations in legal and political disputes. A formal charge of slander could be devastating, but the act of spreading slander informally, through whispers and veiled criticisms, was a far more common and effective weapon in court intrigue. Imagine being able to destroy someone's life simply by starting a persistent rumor that they secretly prefer unorthodox philosophical texts, and that's enough to get them purged. Historians still argue whether the extreme emphasis on character assassination and reputation destruction in Joseon court intrigue was primarily a consequence of Confucian society's profound valuation of moral rectitude and scholarly integrity, making personal reputation a uniquely vulnerable point for attack. Or if it was a cynical adaptation to the limitations of direct political opposition, forcing factions to resort to indirect and insidious means of attack. Was it about moral purity, or political necessity, that made reputation so fragile? The destruction of reputation often began with subtle attacks on your character, suggesting arrogance, laziness, or a lack of moral rectitude. If these seeds took root, then more serious accusations could follow, often leveraging Confucian principles. For example, a rival might subtly imply that your filial piety loyalty to your parents is lacking, a grave insult in Joseon society, which could be used as indirect evidence of disloyalty to the king. These campaigns of defamation spread rapidly through the palace grapevine, amplified by eager informants. Remember those from Section 8. Courtiers would start to view you with suspicion. Your allies might begin to distance themselves, and eventually, the king's favor, your ultimate shield, would start to wane. The very perception of your guilt, meticulously constructed by your enemies, would become more powerful than any objective truth. The consequences were devastating. Once your reputation was sufficiently tarnished, you would be vulnerable to a full-blown purge. Exile. Remember that cruel fate from Section 6 was a common outcome, but for those whose reputations were utterly ruined, more brutal penalties, including torture Section 7 or even ritual suicide Section 9, could be decreed. often with the justification that their moral failings were so profound they were a danger to the kingdom. You feel the chilling realization that a carefully constructed lie can be far more powerful than any truth. You observe a former colleague, once respected, now shunned, his reputation utterly destroyed by a sustained campaign of whispers and false accusations. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about direct conflict, it's about the pervasive, terrifying reality of propaganda. Your life is a constant battle for your good name, where a whisper, a false accusation, or a cleverly planted rumor could systematically dismantle everything you've built, ensuring that your downfall was meticulously orchestrated and your legacy tarnished long before your ultimate demise, a constant testament to the ruthless power of reputation's ruin in the perilous world of Joseon power. After navigating the deadly games of royal succession, the brutal purges of scholar officials, the ruthless machinations of the harem, the silent threat of poison, the crushing cruelty of exile, the agonizing torment of torture, the pervasive paranoia of spies, the grim formality of ritual suicide, the heavy burden of the king's dilemma, the immense pressures of foreign influence, the ambiguous power of eunuchs, and the insidious ruin of propaganda. You finally emerge from our journey through Joseon court intrigue to confront its complex and enduring legacy power's price. The beautiful, serene facades of the Joseon Palace hid a world of relentless, often brutal, internal conflict that, while sometimes strengthening the state through internal reforms, also frequently weakened it, contributing to its eventual decline and shaping its long, tumultuous history. You realize that the very pursuit of power, however legitimate, came with a profound and often devastating human cost, etching a grim reality into the very fabric of Korean history. It's like looking at a meticulously crafted, elegant piece of machinery, only to realize that its internal components are constantly grinding against each other, slowly wearing it down. You reflect on the endless cycles of factional strife, the rise and fall of powerful families, the sudden shifts in royal favor, and the constant threat of violent ends. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a continuous, defining characteristic of Joseon's political landscape, a constant internal war for dominance. This internal struggle, while sometimes leading to necessary reforms or the weeding out of incompetent officials, more often drained the kingdom's resources, diverted the king's attention, and created deep-seated resentments that weakened national unity. One mainstream historical fact that highlights this pervasive internal conflict is that the continuous cycle of political purges and intense factional strife within the Joseon court, fueled by fierce ideological debates and the ruthless pursuit of power, often led to profound instability. Weakened national defense, especially against foreign invasions like those from Japan and later Western powers, and contributed to the dynasty's long-term decline. The constant internal battles exacted a heavy toll on the kingdom. Think about it while you're fighting each other. The enemies at your borders are watching, waiting. Imagine the waste of talent. Brilliant scholars and capable administrators, essential for good governance, were frequently exiled, tortured, or executed. Remember those scholar purges. Section 3. Simply for being on the wrong side of a political divide or for holding an unpopular opinion. Their knowledge and expertise, so vital for the kingdom's progress, were lost to endless factionalism. The very intellectuals meant to serve the state became its most frequent victims. A tragic, self-inflicted wound on the national body. A particularly quirky tidbit that reflects the long-lasting impact of this intrigue is the detailed and often biased nature of subsequent historical accounts. Later ruling factions would frequently rewrite or reinterpret official court histories like the Joseon Wangjo Silok. Remember those royal historians from the intro, subtly manipulating narratives to legitimize their own rise to power and demonize their defeated predecessors, perpetuating the cycle of political infighting even in the historical record. Imagine later historians constantly spinning the truth to make their side look good, creating a historical record that's as much about propaganda as fact. Historians still argue whether the Joseon court's pervasive culture of intrigue, with its constant purges and factionalism, was a fundamental weakness that inevitably led to the dynasty's fragility and eventual fall to foreign domination, or if it was also a unique, albeit brutal, method of internal political negotiation and renewal, ensuring ideological purity and preventing outright civil war by allowing for frequent, if bloody, internal adjustments to the power balance. Did it cause its fall, or did it allow it to survive for 5 centuries despite its flaws? The king, for all his absolute authority, was often a tragically isolated figure. Remember the king's dilemma. Section 10. Constantly navigating this treacherous landscape. His own life frequently at risk from assassination. Section 5. Or the machinations of ambitious relatives. Succession. Section 2. Harem intrigue. Section 4. His decisions, even the most brutal, were often made under immense pressure, aimed at preserving his own power and the stability of the throne amidst the relentless internal strife. The consequences of this ceaseless court intrigue extended far beyond the palace walls. It often led to governmental paralysis, as officials focused more on political survival than on effective administration. It diverted resources and attention from pressing national issues, such as economic development or national defense, leaving the kingdom vulnerable to external threats. Recall foreign influence. Section 11. The very concept of justice itself became a political tool, manipulated to eliminate rivals rather than to uphold impartiality. Remember, justice brutal, arbitrary. Section 12. You feel the weight of this history, the lingering sense of unspoken conflicts and countless ruined lives. The beautiful palaces, the serene Confucian philosophy, the meticulous bureaucracy, all were tinged with the dark reality of relentless power struggles. The awful truth about Joseon court intrigue isn't just about the personal suffering, it's about the profound, pervasive impact it had on an entire dynasty. Your journey through this world reveals that the very pursuit of power, however necessary for governance, came at a terrible price, creating a legacy of internal conflict that, even as it shaped the kingdom for centuries, ultimately contributed to its fragility, etching a grim and complex truth into the heart of Joseon history, a constant reminder of the high cost of the throne. Now, as the whispers of Joseon Palace intrigue fade, and the shadows of its brutal power struggles grow quiet, let the stillness of your room embrace you. The plots, the purges, the betrayals, and the heavy price of ambition are safely in the past, part of a history that now dissolves into the gentle hum of your fan. You've journeyed through a world where even absolute power came with immense and often terrible burdens, and now, it's time for you to find your own peaceful rest. Let your mind unwind, your muscles relax, and sink into a deep, undisturbed sleep, far from the perilous secrets of the Joseon court. End of script. Sweet dreams.